Hi everyone, my name's Dahlia. Welcome to my channel. I know I haven't posted a video in about a month or so, something like that. It's fine. Today, I had really strong and sudden urge to make a video that was not my usual kind of video, which I talk about specific books. Today I wanted to make a video where I talk about something that's been an ongoing discussion in online book communities such as Tumblr and BookTube obviously, and that is the issue of diversity and representation in YA. And this is something that I realize is really important to me. As you can probably tell, I am a person of color. I'm Mexican American. I identify as Latina, and I just realized that I have a lot to say on this topic, and I didn't even know where to start on this issue of like diversity and stuff, and I've decided to begin this video, just making this video about representation and why it matters. So this stuff, some of it I've never really talked about before to like any of my friends. Maybe I've mentioned it a couple times, but there's a lot of things here that I have never spoken out loud, and so I'm kind of nervous, but at the same time I kind of just want to take a leap of faith and go with it. I hope this doesn't turn into like a big rambly video, but if it does, please bear with me because some of the stuff I want to say is very important to me, and it would mean a lot if you stayed and listened. So, representation and diversity. Lately, diversity has been a word that some people who don't like it use as a way to, like, I don't know, they kind of freak out over it, because I'm thinking about like people who are white, who are straight, who are able-bodied, basically people who are, you know, anyone not the minority, and they're taking this as like this thing where like, oh, it's something that is like being stuffed down their throat. It's this concept that's like, you know, getting really annoying, and you know, a book can be good if it's not diverse and blah blah blah, and they're getting really defensive over the lack of diversity. Like they're defending the lack of diversity. And while I can see some of their arguments, I also think that representation matters, and I love the idea of books having diversity if the diversity is accurate and people are being represented accurately, of course, because we don't want to play into stereotypes that can also be harmful to people. But I want to talk about why representation matters specifically to me, because, you know, I don't want to speak from other people's experiences. I think it's important to talk about my own personal experiences, because I have had some where I realize if I've read books that had, you know, more representation, more characters who were like me, who looked like me, then maybe some of this stuff wouldn't have happened. So the first anecdote that I want to get into is when I was about 14 or 15, just discovering my love for writing. Yes, I realized that at that young age that I think I wanted to be an author or, you know, a novelist, and I'm still aspiring to be one. But obviously my style and my writing, my goals have changed since then. You'll see why when I get to this story. My very first story was set in this high fantasy world. I don't even remember the name of it. It took place, you know, it was centered around these three sisters. There was a conflict. They were also witches, and, you know, there's probably a lot of cliches in my story, I'm not gonna lie. But the main thing was my main character. I think her name was Celine, and she had pale skin, platinum blonde hair, really light blue eyes. This was my character, my main character. Nothing like me at all. And I was thinking about this last night, which is why I wanted to make this video today. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, holy shit, like why? Why did I do that? It's so cringy, it's so problematic, And it's like I felt disgusted with myself when I like recalled, like, oh my god, this was my very first main character I've ever written, and she was not only white but also like very skinny and super tall and magical, and obviously my fantasy world is going to have magic in it. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that she was nothing like me, and by writing her, I was erasing my own identity. And I didn't realize it back then. I didn't see the problem in this. Now, I'm not saying that white people are the problem, that I have a problem with them, that, they are, disgusting and that I can't even think about them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that as a person of color, as a Latina, I couldn't even write a character who was remotely brown as I am. And that's just cringy, and that just bothers me. And just, I don't know how many other people have, experienced this. People of colors who are also writers, if they've ever, thought about this before. But this is just disturbing to me that, 14, 15-year-old little girl me wrote this kind of stuff and didn't even think twice about it. And it's not the fact that I hated myself, that I hated my identity, that I didn't like being brown, being Latina, being a female. Like, I didn't have a problem with myself. The fact was, I was writing someone that I thought was supposed to be considered normal, who was, what I was reading in the books that I've read in those days. A lot of the books I've read growing up didn't really feature brown people. Like, they're predominantly white. There's probably like one or two books that I can think of that I've ever read in my like young childhood before college. I'm in college now. That had, representation of people of color in their books. And this is why representation matters, because it affected my own writing. I could even see myself in my own story, and it just really got to me last night, and this is why I have to say it right now. I know that a lot of authors who are not people of color, who are not, queer or identify as, any other gender other than, they're cisgender, what they were assigned to at birth, they're straight, whatever, they feel uncomfortable with writing people into their stories who are not themselves, because they feel like they cannot represent them because they haven't been in their experiences, they have not been in their shoes. I get that. It's scary, but at the same time, I feel like it's still important to represent people. Do your research, talk to people of, who are different than you, and get to know them, get to understand them, and respect them, respect their identity. Don't fall into stereotypes, because including them into your stories is going to be just, I feel like it's just going to make stories and YA all that better, because seeing yourself in a story, I feel like would be just such a powerful thing. You don't have to write, if you're a white person, you don't have to write a black person into your story and write about the experiences of being black. Like, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking for, like, just accurate representation for them to be black, but also for them to be a fully rounded person as well, that the blackness is not the only driving, characteristic. It's an integral part of them, yes, but it's not the only thing that that identify them, basically. And I just think this is so important. If I wanted to see myself into a story, which I have yet to do. I've read, obviously, books by, like, Latinx authors, but I still have yet to see, like, myself represented, like, fully, like, female, like, kind of shy, kind of introverted, but also, like, very, like, also happens, to be Latina, and I don't know, I'm waiting for the day, and so that is one reason why representation matters. Now, I want to get into another story. Also has to do with writing. This happened last semester in college. It happened toward the end of this class. I was taking this class called like the craft of the young adult novel. It was a creative writing class, and I've loved it so much. Basically, kind of like the title of it suggests, we learned about the craft of the young adult novel. And one of our exercises that our teacher had us do was to get into groups of like 3 or 4. She gave us a prompt that had like, that had like a suggestion for a story, and we had to like create the outline of the story and then present it to the class. So our topic had something to do with time travel, and so we had a character who caught a thief who was like trying to take her father's time machine, and they ended up going back into the past. And for some reason, my group and we chose the antebellum period in the South. And so obviously this is already creating like a lot of tensions in terms of like race and all that historical stuff that happened back then. And so our character, we make the story, and then this whole time I'm thinking like, okay, so is this character like white or what? Like, what's going on with that? Like, this is just in my head, because I'm like, well, I'm Mexican, and I don't know what a Mexican girl would do if she were sent back to the antebellum period in the South, because like, were there even Mexicans in that area in that time period? Like, what the hell would that look like, and what would they experience? Like, and it's just like weird and complicated, so I didn't bring that up. I was like, well, maybe they shouldn't be Mexican. I don't know. Or maybe they should. It would be a cool story, but it would also be like complicated in terms of like ethnicity and the race and all that like that was going on and the struggle. So I was like, well, I don't know if we should make a black person our character be a black person, because like we're not black. Because I should tell you now, my group members were all white except for me. Obviously we're not black, and so I was like, I don't know what that experience would be like, and we don't have the time to like explore it, and that's not our story to tell. So I didn't bring that up either. So I was like, great, so I guess our character is just gonna be white, because that's just what everyone else is assuming. It's not even something that's brought up. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll go with it. And we present our story to our class. Our teacher's like, anyone got questions? And people ask their questions. And then our teacher's like, okay, I have a question. Like, did you guys consider that the ethnicity of this girl? Like, is this girl white or is this girl a person of color? Because, they would have very different experiences in this story. And my group members' faces were just like, oh. And I was like, yeah, you didn't even think about that. They literally look so dumbfounded. I was like, holy shit, they didn't even think about this. And here am I overthinking it, and I didn't even say anything because I was like, I don't even know what it would do to our story. Like, it would complicate it so much. But like, I felt bad for not saying anything, because I'm a person of color and I'm thinking about this kind of stuff, and they're not. And they're not bad people. It's just like, it didn't even cross their minds that this person might not be white. She would literally, if she was a person of color, the story would change completely. And that's what I mean. And this is something that happened last year, and I was the one who ended up feeling uncomfortable. I mean, they probably might have too, after like being called out by our teacher. But like, I felt awkward and ashamed, like, as a person of color in this group, as the only one in this group. I should have, been the voice of like, hey, is this person white, or is she gonna be a person of color? Like, what's the deal here? And I don't say anything, and I felt shitty afterward. Like, I felt responsible for it. And I don't understand why it has to be me, why I have to be the one to feel shitty for it, like, why couldn't they have like considered it as well, And it's just this thing where like, they didn't even consider the representation of someone else besides, the norm. Ugh, I hate that. But yeah, it's just, this is again, bringing it back to the title of my video. This is why representation matters. They've probably also read a lot of books that are like, by, predominantly white cast, and like, everything else. And because, I don't know, I feel like even if white authors like represented people in their books, it would make everything so much more realistic, because in this world, not everyone is the same. Not everyone experiences the same thing. Yes, a lot of people like to say, oh, I don't see color. I don't care if you're brown, if you're white, if you're, green or whatever. I think everyone should be seen as the same. And I think that is such a nice thought. But it's just not gonna work out. Because let me tell you, people experience this world differently. People walk this world differently than others. If you are white, you will be getting a different experience than if you are a person of color. If you are straight, you will get different experiences than someone who is a part of the LGBTQ plus community who identifies as something other than cisgender. Just like, people experience different things. There's more hostility towards minority groups, as you can see from this recent election. So the fact that you're saying that you don't see our identities, that everyone is seen as the same and that's how it should be, is problematic, because you're erasing our own struggles that we've had to put forth basically throughout all of history. I mean, voting rights, marriage rights, all of that, like, literally, you can't ignore that. And that's something important, even if it's in a high fantasy world where, like, Mexican doesn't exist, obviously. Characters can still be brown, because I don't know, I feel like there's nothing wrong with that. Seeing a brown character in a high fantasy world would be freaking awesome. And I don't mean, oh, he's tan. Like, there's nothing wrong with the word brown. Like, just go out and say it. Just, embrace it. And, people look different. They're not all pale-skinned or white or Caucasian, just representation, people. Another form of representation that is also very important is, I think, Own Voices. It's such a great movement. I think it's the most brilliant idea ever. Own Voices is a movement basically where, people are actively trying to read books by minority authors, written by minority authors about those minority characters. That probably sounded really confusing. For example, if I were to write an Own Voices book, it would probably be about, a girl who was, Mexican American, living my life, blah, 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 just like stuff like that. I think it's so cool, and I think it's also up to readers to represent people in their, reading. Go out and, read something out of your comfort zone. I would say, I know people shouldn't have to work hard to read these underrepresented minority authors, but that's the reality. And until, like, we can get, like, people to, like, rave about, I don't know, something, minority author of something, and it's like raved about just as much as like Sarah J. Maas's like new A Court of Wings and Ruin or whatever that book is. Like, just like, it's not as represented, and that's just because people are not reading these books. And there has been this movement to like get more people to read these books and to be more aware of what they're reading and what they're picking out, because representation matters. So yes, it's important for white people, white authors, Caucasian authors, straight authors, able-bodied authors to include and incorporate minorities into their stories. It's also important for readers to read stories about minority characters by minority authors and marginalized authors. It's just great, Goodness gracious, I don't even know. Yeah, anyways, I think this video has been long enough. I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. I have expressed my opinion. I have shared my two big experiences. Just want to wrap it up. personally, if I had read more books that had more representation, more diversity, more characters that I could really identify with, and I don't mean identify with like, you know, politically or mentally, opinion, you know, in like in terms of opinion, I mean really in terms of identity, you know, this integral thing that makes me me. I wouldn't have had to write a character who was, you know, basically white and nothing at all like me. Um, that wouldn't have been a thing, and I'm just really sad that that happened. And I'm just barely starting to find my voice and find my footing, um, with my writing, and it means a lot to me. And so I could only hope that this also means a lot to other people who are also underrepresented. Um, it's just, you know, vital, I think. It's also something that I feel like would build more empathy within people reading, you know, about other people, reading stories that include other people. It would just create so much more empathy, especially in light of like, you know, recent political events. And it's still ongoing. Like there's still a lot of issues in our society that include discrimination and hatred and bigotry and misogyny and racism and, you know, homophobia and all of this stuff. And I don't know, just people are people, yes, but it's important to acknowledge our differences, accept them, respect them, and just, you know, live together in harmony and all that cheesy shit. um, so yeah, if you are a writer, please consider the experiences of others. Please, you know, don't necessarily write about those experiences, especially if they don't belong to you. But, you know, consider them, include them, but don't take the voice away from others. I'm being very contradicting right now. I'm hoping I'm making a lot of sense. I just want people to be represented. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I want it to be done right. This is just turning into a mess. Ugh, my ideas are all over the place, but you get the gist. You get the gist. Anyways, I think that's all. Guess I'll see you later. Thanks for watching, really though. I know this video's been long.